Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. Alibis, happy Tuesday, November 1st. So this morning I got in the car to take my daughter to school, and immediately she says, "It's November 1st. You know what that means?" And proceeded to play Mariah Carey, All I Want to Do. So that's how my day started. All right, day 34. Big day. Angela Wagner in the hot seat for half the day, more than half the day. She came in before lunch. We're going to get to it real quick. Big thank you to Constance, Amy, Dina, Debbie, Mary Lou for the donations. And also, some of you have given super thanks on YouTube, and they don't make it super easy for me to see who did until the end of the month. So I'm going to shout you guys out at the end of the month. And I was thinking, Judge Deering could totally do a legal podcast in his retirement because he has a smooth voice. I'm just going to say. All right. Music fact of the day. Phil Collins, Take a Look at Me Now. Against All Odds, Take a Look at Me Now. It has like 2 titles. Really amazing song. I've always loved it. I thought it was one song that was just sung with so much passion in his voice. I knew it had to be personal. So I looked up why he wrote the song. He was approached to write the theme song for that movie way back in the 80s. And he said that it was written during his first divorce. And his first wife and the kids had gone. He was left all by himself. And so he decided to write a song out of experience as opposed to a what if song. And very passionate song. All right, so let's get to the good stuff. First off, big thank you to Big E, Chasing Paper 89 on Twitter. Give him a follow, buy him a coffee. Also, big thank you to Just Trevor on Twitter, our note taker. She took some pictures today. That's epic beard dude Matt White leaving after his testimony, and then just a dreary old day there in Pike County. All right. Also, yesterday, I could not find this. This was such a big oops. Okay, if you're new to the podcast, I'm going to say it frequently. If you're listening and not watching on YouTube, I put graphics up, but I also put a link in the description for anybody who wants to see what I'm talking about. Here is the Pinterest page. I'm pretty convinced that Angela did not mean to put among her Bible verses and her sensory diet pin. Family named in Ohio Massacre investigation moves to Alaska. Whoopsies. Anyways, I just thought that was kind of ironic, don't you think? All right, let's get to it. So what happened when, Angela came in the courtroom. George didn't look up. She didn't look at him from what I've heard at first. I did catch George stealing a glance at her shortly after she was seated. He looked down a lot. More, I think, than he did when Jake was on the stand. And also here is a shot of Angela coming into the courthouse, shackled up, clink, clink, making noises with every step she took. She did eventually look at him a couple of times. Big E said he never saw her look his way, but I did read a couple of people in there say that she did glance, especially right before lunch. A couple of people saw that. And Jamie said that Angela was seemingly emotionless most of the time. She was really soft-spoken from what I've heard. Eric and Jamie both said they had a problem hearing her sometimes, and which is super different from that intercepted call where she's super excited about the acres they had in Alaska. And also that Border Patrol stop where she was very animated and loud. I guess a little humble jail pie has quietened her down a bit. Those stripes are so her. Okay. So, one thing that I've been thinking about is this timeline. I'm really going to try to work tomorrow in the downtime since she has opted out, as we know. And also just Jamie and Big E, give them a thanks if you're on Twitter because they did not disappoint today. It was as if I was sitting in there. Their notes were so thorough. I don't think we missed much at all. So just just want to acknowledge without the two of them, we would not have what we have tonight. So big thanks. I'm super, super grateful. Back to this timeline. So according to Jake, they leave before 10 p.m. the Peterson Road. They pull off. We know Billy's like, okay, you can back out now or it's never. Jake said, let's do this. They get to Chris's, I think around 10, maybe a little bit before. We know that Chris Sr. isn't murdered until around 10:55 because that's the last outgoing call from his phone to Billy's cell in the ruse of I've lost my phone. George didn't shoot when he should have. So he says they get back home at 4:30, and I just feel like there is a lot of time unaccounted for in this timeline. We know that they drove by Dana's, less than a mile from Chris's. We know that, or they walk to Frankie's, walk back, get the truck, go to Dana's, drive by. See, she's not there. Drive to Kenneth's, which is just a few miles down the road, if I'm not mistaken. Then they drive back to Chris Sr.'s, go to Frankie's, go to Dana's, go to Kenneth's, and go home. That is a lot of time. Big E is actually going at some point to drive the exact route that they took to see how long it took him. And we know Jake said they were in Dana's house the longest, and he estimated that to be 10 minutes to 15. So I just feel like from 10:55 to 4:30, what's going on? I know the drive to and from Peterson to Chris Sr.'s is a little longer, but anyways, I really want to try to put that in order. All right. So we had up first, Matt White, epic beard dude, finished his testimony. And it was long, but I just condensed it because it was a lot of technical stuff. And I have to say, I enjoy hearing him testify because I've actually learned a lot from his testimony. Not even kidding you guys. I have a snub nose 38 if somebody were to want to come in my house. But as a whole, I have my CWP. I don't, but I'm not a gunny. So I've learned a lot of things listening to him. I really like him. Julia, my other favorite. So he test fired the Glock that was found in the concrete, and the ballistics matched the casings from crime scenes 1 and 4, which are Chris Sr. and Gary, as well as Kenneth. The SKS was also found in the concrete. All these were cut up, broken up. He wasn't able to fire that one due to the damage in the barrel, but he did cast it, and he was able to find that the lancing grooves and the right hand twist were consistent with the 30 caliber bullets from scene 1, which is Gary and Chris Sr. They found 21 7.62 by 39 millimeter cartridges in that concrete. Holy smokes, y'all. Insanity. All right, Angela Wagner, what did we learn? I will say nothing super explosive like we did with Jake, and I didn't expect to with Angela because Jake, we've always wondered, how did they do it? What was the sequence? Because I followed this case from day one, literally. I remember tuning into local news stations to kind of just watch their coverage all day. It wasn't widely covered on mainstream media that day. It was more, local, even though it was a huge case. And so, you go through all this in the beginning, of course, they focus in on Bobby Joe and then Dana's brother, and then that kind of goes away. And then the whole cartel theory, which I never really bought into in a big way. I could see if Chris were growing, Chris and Kenneth were growing like acres and acres of marijuana, but they had a couple of small little grow houses. I mean, certainly bigger than the average person growing for recreational purposes, or maybe just to supply a few friends and make a couple extra $100 a month. It was bigger than that. But, I always thought like cartel, it's not worth their time or the risk. The dogs and the kids were left alive, just doesn't have that signature. I always sort of thought local drug dealers that maybe he was invading their turf, and there was a little turf war. And then when the Wagners came on, when they were named, as you know, they were in Alaska when they did that big search warrant, or no, the big press release rather, where they said, if you've had any dealings with him with firearms or whatever, let us know. And I still thought, but if they murdered this family of 8, Why did they wait a year to move? And then all these search warrants happens and then they move back. So honestly, guys, in the beginning, I was like, they're barking up the wrong tree. These people aren't going to move back. If you want to get off the grid, go to Alaska and stay. But ultimately, as we know, they did it. Jake confessed. But that was kind of my whole thought process. It was interesting following the local feeds on like Facebook groups and topics at the time and reading all the different theories. And the town was very divided, I think, at some point until really Jake confessed, which is interesting because had he not confessed, I'm not sure how much of a case they would have had against George at all. And yeah, so it's been interesting to watch from literally day one. But let's get into what Angela said. So Prosecutor Canepa just comes right out with it. Asks Angela, are you guilty of being involved in the murder of 8 people? And she says, yes. She admits they planned and prepared for the murders. She acknowledges she didn't leave the house the night of the murders and says that afterwards she helped cover things up. When asked who all was involved, she said Billy, Jake, and George, as well as herself. So then they kind of get into her history. Angela and Billy have been married since January 12th, 1991. So that's 31 years now. They lived at the Bethel Hill house from around 1993 to 2014. Jake was around 6 months old when they moved into that house. The boys went to public school for 2 to 3 weeks when they were in early grades, but she decided to homeschool ultimately. She thought the schools were overcrowded and that George and Jake would not be getting one-on-one help. So that's kind of how that decision came to be. She said George and Jake were close growing up. They would fish and hunt and do farm stuff together. She says that the boys were definitely closer to her than to Billy. He taught them survivalist skills, how to steal, how to destroy property for the insurance payouts. And Angela worked on Flying W Farms, cleaning the stalls in the horses thingies and the animal barns on third shift, and also worked at the Crystal Springs house, taking clients to their appointments. She said she worked 16-hour days, and that ended about 15 or 16 years ago. And she said it's hard working for family sometimes. She said between 2007 and 2008, Billy would steal couches. They would pull up and he would take them at night. I don't know where it wasn't really specified, like a store on people's porches. I really don't know. But Angela was arrested for shoplifting at some point, and both Angela and Billy were arrested for receiving stolen property. That was testified to, I think, earlier in the trial, where they stole a bunch of Rocky boots and hid them in the basement and ultimately were selling them at the fair. And I remember hearing if they had taken them out of the box, they may not have been arrested, but the SKU numbers, I guess, tied it to being stolen property. She said she would be the lookout when Billy was stealing fuel. She would look out for the driver coming back. And Angela said she would steal from places like Walmart, Tractor Supply, and Ollie's. She would just put things in a cart and push them out. She had been to one of the 4th of July parties at Chris Sr.'s and one other event. And I think maybe now I've been wondering, where do these 4th of July parties come in? I think really it's just to reiterate that they all crossed paths and knew each other at some point. They all had hung out in some capacity. She had been to Dana's when she lived at the old trailer. Angela said the house was a mess. She never did go into that new home. They moved in just a month before the murders. She also knew Billy was learning from Chris Sr. how to grow marijuana, but she wasn't allowed in the basement. And after they got those charges, they removed the plants and eventually bought a camper to grow in. And she thinks that was around the 2010 to 2011 timeframe. She's not sure how long they worked out of that camper. Billy also told her she wasn't allowed to talk to Chris Sr. So eventually in 2009 to 2010, Jake and George went to diesel mechanic school, and then they got their CDLs. So they start talking about the arsons at Bethel Hill, and she admits they were intentional. They burned down the house at Bethel Hill. They also burned a trailer, a semi-truck, a garage, and she said Billy, Jake, and George knew about those. She admitted they moved things out of the house that she wanted to keep just before the fires were set. Remember, Chris Newcomb talked about like one statue that always miraculously made it through every fire they ever had. It would be there when they had their new place. She admits to filing the accident claims on the arsons and doesn't really remember for how much. Now, I will say that Big E, when he called me during lunch break, told me that her memory was super selective and there were a lot of things she couldn't recall. When talking about who all knew about the arsons, she did Billy, George, Jake, and Chris Sr. Again, they moved antiques, furniture, photos, sentimental stuff out of the house. She doesn't know how the fires were started, but she knew it was happening. So ultimately, the reason they decided to burn down that house is because Billy and his mom, Frederica, were going to sell the property because Flying W was just selling off some land. And I'm pretty sure in the notes it said the house had been listed for 2 months, but Frederica's response to them being reimbursed for the house, she said, "You built on my property, too bad." I've heard from 2 different people inside that courtroom. Angela still seemed really bitter when she talked about that today, by the way. So they bought the semi and then the Peterson Road farm in March of 2014. She confirms that house was put in Jake and George's names, and she said this was to help them build credit. She said Billy somewhat lived at the Peterson Road address, but she said he also idolized his dad and went to Flying W Farms to live when his dad got sick. Angela said Billy always wanted to be special to his dad, and she said ultimately she was okay with him moving there. So they burned the semi for the insurance money to pay bills. She doesn't remember exactly what they paid off, but she does remember they paid off Billy's truck. She said that they did pool their money together, but she always asked the boys before she used their credit cards. She said Jake had she calls him Jacob sometimes, apparently, had the Bass Pro Rewards card. And at the end of the year, they would get money back for those purchases. And then they would take that money to do their Christmas shopping every year. She did admit that Billy had problems with pills and says before his arrest, he would have taken anything. She said he used diet pills and one called Adipex to stay awake while trucking. She and George also got them as well, and Chris and his partner. So I looked up Adipex and some side effects. Adipex is a stimulant that can be abused. It's phentermine is similar to amphetamine, but the phentermine stimulates the central nervous system, which is the nerves in the brain, which increases your heart rate and blood pressure and decreases your appetite. Side effects are insomnia and dry mouth, which may explain that 24/7 teeth grinding Billy must have going on. It may cause some people to be agitated, irritable, or display other abnormal behaviors. It can make you feel euphoric, dysphoria. Those are some of the possible adverse side effects. The person may feel tired or not themselves when they're not under the influence of the drug, and you can also abuse it by snorting or smoking it. They got pills from Chris and his partner, and also they in South Shore, Kentucky. So they talked about when Tabitha came to live with them as a younger kid. So she was around 10 and George was 13. They met at the Flying W Farms and played together. She testified to all that when she was on the stand. She says she tried to homeschool Tabby. And when asked if Tabby slept with George, she said she was young and stayed there. But Angela said Tabby slept on the couch, but Tabitha said she slept in the bed with George. When they reunited as teenagers, Tabby was still in high school when she came to live at the Wagner house, and George was 18. Angela found out that Tabby was molested as a child, and it was never reported. And because of this, Angela said Tabby chose not to associate with her family. She brought up Tabby cheating on George, and Angela said George made her choose between her family and his, and she chose his. Tabitha was worried after they got married. It was taking so long to get pregnant. She thought something was wrong, but ultimately they had Vine in 2013. Sophia came along 4 months later. Angela still is convinced poor Tabby tried to poison them, although she never actually saw her do anything, right? She said she assumed. She thinks Tabby put a pill in Bull's bottle. She calls him Bull, I think, according to the notes, and something in George's Kool-Aid that made him sick for a few days. And then she also said Tabby put little pieces of dog hair in her coffee. Angela said something like, "Oh my God, Jake, there's dog hair in my coffee." And Tabby laughed about it. High five, Tabby. She suspected Tabby of stealing from them once, and she had Vine come live with them, and then Tabby left. The night that Tabby left the Wagner home for good, we've heard the different versions, but according to Angela, Tabby had an episode where she was screaming, yelling, and running through the house. George was trying to calm her down, and Angela was holding Vine. Tabby asked for Angela to give her son, and she said, "Give me my baby." And Angela said she told Tabby not until she calmed down. Angela said Vine was crying and that also Vine had a tendency to get hurt when she had these episodes. She admits throwing the piece of wood at Tabby as she left and said, "Just give me a gun. I'm so sick of it." She said she only mentioned getting her gun to snap Tabby out of it, but never planned to do anything with it. And she said she never actually got the gun. So we know Tabby goes out of the house. Jake and Angela go outside to try to find her. She said it was dark. They saw Tabby pushing her bike up a hill. So Jake and George went to find her and calm her down. Angela said she told George just to call the police and let them settle it. Eventually, Tabby's mom showed up at the gas station and George told Angela, "She's not coming back, Mom, call the cops." She said George met Tabby at the courthouse. As we know, he paid her fine. She said George got an attorney. Tabby didn't have one. They get divorced. And also he is awarded full custody of Vine, with Tabby only having those supervised visits when they could, she said, when they could work out a time. And Tabby only came to visit Vine 3 times after the divorce. But we've heard Tabby's version, which is much more believable in that, oh, he's asleep, we're leaving, we have plans, we're not home, just really shutting her out of his life because he could. And it's one of the worst things a parent can do. But, you think about it, you look at Jake and George, and then you think about how they raised their kids, and it's just scary to think, had they gotten away with these murders, where would Vine and Suds be eventually? I think, being raised by these 4 would have been detrimental to their futures. And I'm not glad that any of this happened. I am glad that those kids are away from these monsters, though. She said they had a gun safe in the mudroom by the front door on Peterson. And so they start talking about Hannah Mae. This was actually right before lunch. They drop off in the middle of talking about Hannah Mae. She recalls the story of Jake being asked by Hannah Mae if he wanted to pet her pet rabbit. Now, Angela was there at that fair that day too. And on that day, she met Frankie and little Chris. When asked how she knew they were Chris Sr.'s kids, she said it was just an observation she made when they came running up. So then they start talking about Jake and Hannah Mae dating. Jake was 17 and Hannah Mae was 13. Hannah Mae started coming over with Frankie and little Chris, but she would try and hide from Chris Sr. and Billy because Billy was mad when they started dating, and so was Chris Sr. apparently. She said Jake actually went to her house more in the beginning. According to Angela, little Chris was Hannah Mae's babysitter when she would go off with Jake. Remember, Chris Sr. wanted them to have a chaperone. Little Chris was always to be there with them. And Angela said little Chris would watch them, rat them out, and ride 4-wheelers when he came. Angela said she had a good relationship overall with Hannah Mae. It wasn't perfect, but it was good. Angela said the relationship between Jake and Hannah Mae got serious about a year after they initially started seeing each other. And way before Hannah Mae got pregnant with Sophie, they were pretty serious. Angela said Hannah Mae always wanted a baby and always wanted to be with Jake. She said Hannah Mae was 15 or something like that when she got pregnant. One day, Angela came home from work and Jake wanted his mom to go buy a pregnancy test. And Angela said, "Oh my God, please no, Jake." She was worried about Chris Sr. being mad, but she bought the test. And Hannah Mae did not want to tell her dad about the pregnancy. So she finally went to the clinic with Angela taking her. But somebody saw them there and Hannah Mae freaked out. Dana was livid that Angela took Hannah Mae to the clinic and not her. I would be too. Mother to mother, I would probably make that call and say, hey, look, we got a positive test. Do you want to take your daughter? Angela said she was in the truck waiting with Billy when Suds was born, and I bet that ate her alive. I'm not sure if Dana was in the delivery room. For some reason, I'm thinking I heard she was, but I bet waiting in the truck, because you remember Tabby, she wanted her mom in there, but Angela was in there when she gave birth to Vine. So after Suds was born, if Jake was home, Hannah Mae and the baby would stay with them. And then when he was out on the road, Hannah Mae stayed with her mom and dad. She said Hannah Mae was a good mother and she nursed Suds. She said Suds had a good relationship with Dana, but eventually it got to the point to where, according to Angela, Suds didn't want to go over there. She said the breakup was really hard on Jake. She didn't know Charlie Gilly and didn't have an opinion of him or Corey Holdren. I bet that's a lie. I bet she had a lot of opinions. Angela said she didn't know that Jake was recording the pickup and drop-offs with Hannah Mae, but she did suggest to him that he do it. She went with Jake a couple of times to pick Sophia up. Now, come on, man. Tell me she wasn't listening to those recordings. She had a calendar where she marked if Hannah Mae blinked wrong. I mean, I don't think much was hidden from this woman. I don't think there's much she didn't know. She remembers George going with them a couple of times as well to pick up Hannah Mae, but she doesn't remember George talking about Suds being filthy. Now, we listened to that. It was, I believe, when the car was it was an intercept, like a wiretap, I believe. And George is telling them to go before Chris Sr. and all them come up or whatever. And that's when he just in a mean way said, don't they know how to give you a bath or something like that? Angela makes a comment about it too. I should go back and listen. She said that Billy, George, and Jake all knew she was monitoring social media accounts. She got Tabby's password from George, who had gotten it from Tabby, if you remember, in a show of Faith, when she was caught cheating, she gave George her passwords. And Angela said it was for trust issues. She said she told George she would monitor that for him. And she also acknowledged she monitored Tabby's mom's and sister's Facebook. And she got the passwords from Tabby's inbox messages. She said she took hundreds, if not thousands of screenshots, y'all. And she monitored those accounts for months. She would show those screenshots to George, and she wanted any information she could use against Tabby in the event of a custody battle. She mostly monitored those messages in the evening, either on an iPhone or an iPad. So she admits to seeing the message from Hannah Mae about they'll have to kill me first. She took a screenshot of it. And she also admits she asked Hannah Mae to spy on Tabby when they both lived there at the residence. Hannah Mae told her father, Hannah Mae told Angela the father of her new baby was Charlie in a text message. She became concerned when Sud's attitude started changing. And that concern kind of flipped to Hannah Mae and her boyfriends. She said that when Suds would come back from being over there, she would hit Vine. She was grouchy. She was not sleeping good. And I'm not going to get into specifics, but when Jake would bathe Sophia, he noticed that she was puffy in delicate areas and had an odor. The redness would go away and come back. They thought maybe her diaper wasn't being changed enough, which is, likely. I don't think that I'm not a psychiatrist, but I don't think we ever heard anything credible about any allegations. And I think a lot of this was planted by Angela to further their reasoning for all of this. I really, really do. I mean, we know Jake was worried about it when the kid was still in the womb. And we all worry about our kids when we're pregnant, when they're here, when they're toddlers, kids, teenagers, whatever. You're going to worry about your kids. But they were so consumed with it. It seems like a lot of their day was worrying about the worst things that could happen. And that's so odd to me. According to Angela, Sophia made some claims against a Roden family member that I will not repeat. And this caused Angela to look up child abuse online. Suds did not want to be alone, and she kept coming back to them with the same problem that we talked about earlier. Angela told Billy to keep an eye out when he was at Chris Sr.'s or around any of the Wagners. He said he didn't see anything suspicious of any of them except someone saw Frankie kiss Suds on the mouth. And she said that was a red flag and inappropriate. Billy thought one of Hannah Mae's brothers was being overly affectionate to Suds. So that's how it was written. And it, you know, look, when my kids were little, like I kissed them on the mouth. And I mean, like my niece and nephew, I did too. Like they're big now and I wouldn't do it. But when they were little, I did. And it was just because I'm their aunt and I love them. I mean, maybe some people are not comfortable with that. And that's cool. That's totally like a, you do you thing as a parent. But Suds also said little Chris put something in her bubble gum. Angela didn't take her to the doctor for any of these claims, and she doesn't think Jake did. While over at the Rodens, so Suds also put her finger on a muffler of a four-wheeler, and it burned her finger. Angela said ultimately she just thought one of the Rodens was abusing Suds. But here's my thing. Why do you not take her to a doctor if that is the concern? Because that tells me that she had convinced herself of this, because the first thing you're going to do is go make sure your child's okay. And then you're going to make sure that child's getting therapy. But that's not how these people think. So initially, this is all what led to the hatching of the plan in January of 2016 to murder Hannah Mae. Billy apparently first suggested it, according to Angela and to Jake. And it was first talked about in their carport, just between the two of them, Angela and Billy. She said they didn't believe in the justice system or children's services, so that's why they didn't report any of their suspicions. At first, she thought turning Chris Sr. in for the grow ops would give Jake more control over the situation as a whole. And Billy said, absolutely not. Because we're not going to rat on him and throw him in the pokey. We're going to kill him. I mean, it makes no sense. These people think so backwards, y'all. Every day my mind is blown in this case with these people. So then Angela asked why, what about just Hannah Mae? And Billy said the others would retaliate. She said Billy convinced her of this. And she says, she admits on the stand they all had to be murdered. And when asked who they was, she said Chris Sr., Hannah Mae, Frankie, and little Chris. I didn't see Dana in the notes, and I didn't see Gary or Kenneth. She said they had talked about just Hannah Mae, but Billy said they would come shoot Jake, if not all of them. So ultimately, she agreed that more people other than Hannah Mae needed to be murdered. Then Jake and George were told about the idea. They talked about how they would never talk about the murders afterwards. Excuse me. Also, they talked about in great detail how they plan to cover up these murders. They talked about the items they would need, like masks and gloves. Billy said this was going to change everything. And even before the murders, they would turn on background noise or go outside when they would talk about this stuff, already paranoid that they're being listened to even before they commit them. There was a lot of discussions about the purchases needed and what supplies they needed to get. So Jake gave her a list, and she was present during the talks about all of this. She said Jake worried about Sophia and Brentley both. It sounds like, from what Angela testified to, that Billy was really the top dog in the murders. Billy told her to buy the bug detector, the cell phone jammer, so that the rodents couldn't call 911, and also the shoes. He told her to get smaller sizes than what the boys wore. And then she was told by Billy not to buy anything else. Instead of the Waverly Walmart she normally shopped at, she went to West Union to buy these shoes. And then she acknowledges Jake, George, Vine, and Sophia were in the car waiting. They show her pictures of herself in the store and the car leaving, and she says, yep, that's my Ford Excursion. So if you remember, we talked about when George's credit card was flagged. And then this was when they were trying to buy that bug jammer from overseas. And so it flagged as a fraud purchase potentially. And she doesn't remember if she called customer service or not. The jammer did arrive at their home, and all the things that they bought for the murders were kept in that gun cabinet by the door. She admits to doing the custody documents for Vine and Suds in case anything happened to Jake or George that night, that they would go to her so that the kids could stay together. She also says both Jake and George signed their names on the documents. She signed Hannah Mae's name. She also notarized it and signed her mom's name and used a seal to give that raised seal on the document. The moron wasn't even aware that the print date was in the details in very fine print on the bottom. So, oh man, karma. She said both her and Jake bought things on the computer for the homicides because they were better with computers than Billy and George were. She said Billy was really mad when Jake bought the surveillance system from Walmart. Angela, Jake, and George, the three of them installed that. Jake got up on the roof. They had him pointing in different directions. When Billy saw it, he was ticked off, said, "Take it down. This is a stupid idea because people would be able to see them coming and going." She says she doesn't remember what truck they not used the night of the murders, but she knew one had been purchased specifically for that night. George grabbed the money from the gun cabinet to pay for it. They usually kept about $5,000 cash in there for emergencies. And she thinks Jake went with Billy to get the truck. She said it was a green Dodge. It was like a dark colored GMC, I believe. She knows they kept it behind a barn up the hill. And when asked why they needed a new truck for the homicide, she said Billy thought the diesel truck of his would be way too loud. She asked Jake and George if they really wanted to go through with it shortly before the murders, and Jake said yes. At some point, there was something in the notes that said, she said everyone's heart wasn't in it, but ultimately they decided they had to protect Suds. So if you remember, Billy said he would be the one to decide the night that these murders would happen. So he showed up at Peterson one night and told him to come on, let's go. This is the night. And nobody was paying attention to him. So he got mad and left. He came back another day on the 21st, as we know, and he told Jake to get ready. Angela said Billy was super bossy. None of them were getting ready fast enough. He was screaming at Angela, telling her what to do with the phones and to text somebody named James Roten, not Roden, Roten with a T, from the phones to make it look like they all were communicating from the house there at Peterson. She said he was irate with Jake and George, telling them to get their shoes on. Angela doesn't know what time they left, but she knows they left after dark. She said Billy was wearing blue jeans, and she knows the boys were wearing dark colored clothes. And the three of them walked out the door. She said she had a lot of emotions that night as they left and thought of jumping in her car to stop them, but then she worried about leaving Vine and Suds, who were asleep. She said she didn't see them leave. And when asked if she gave the kids anything to sleep that night, she said no, but admits she had done that before. She also said Jake didn't watch the Boondock Saints clip. We know Jake said he did, but she said Billy, George, and Jake would say the ding dong mother beeper phrase in the days leading up to the murders. Angela didn't know who was killing who. She didn't ask, and she wasn't told. She said she never left the house the night of the murder. She said she locked the door, sent the text, went upstairs, took her meds, and went night-night until the morning. I call diabetes. She got diabetes up there, y'all. She doesn't remember what time they got back, but she said it was daylight. George and Jake walked into the kitchen and were wearing light-colored shirts. She said she didn't know what to think, but this contradicts Jake's testimony where he said he took off all of his clothes except his boxers. He walked in. He didn't say it with them. His mom was in the kitchen. They didn't say a word to each other. And then he went and got his clothes on and got the duffel bag to put the guns in. That's a discrepancy that caught me today. She said ultimately she was relieved when they all three got home, and it was obvious none of them had got hurt. Billy told her everything was fine and that he took care of it. She didn't ask anything else about who killed who because she said she didn't want to know. So later on that morning, after Billy came in, he went to the TV room, and that's when the news started breaking about the murders. Angela said she was actually shocked that he went through with the plan. He told Angela to call the boys to come back to the house. Remember, this is when they were going to that building, excuse me, that Angela had bought to sell for profit, and they had forgotten the chainsaw. Angela said she didn't know how many of the rodents were killed until she saw it on the news, and she asked Billy why there were so many victims, and Billy said because they were there. And that was something they had talked about before, was anybody who was there was going to be killed. You think about Corey Halderson and then little Chris's friend. Had they come over those nights, I think somebody was going to say with, was it Kendra? One of Hannah Mae's cousins was possibly going to stay. There were 3 other potential victims that by some strange twist of fate, it didn't work out for them to be there that night. So when the boys got back, they watched the news. She said they acted like nothing had happened. She said she kept the kids occupied and didn't know what was said between the 3 of them. You know she was watching too, because Jake testified that the kids were in George's room watching cartoons while they watched the news. Lie beat it. She said they did normal things that next day with Vaughn and Sophia, and she doesn't know what Jake and George did, but she was aware Jake went to the hospital to check on Kylie. She said she didn't go to the funerals, but Jake, George, and Billy did. Jake told Suds her mommy had gone to heaven to be with Jesus about a week after the murders, and Billy told them several times after the murders what to do about certain things. He stayed at Peterson Road I said Peterson. Lord, y'all. It's been a long one. I said Peterson. He stayed at Peterson Road a few days after the murders, but it didn't go well, so he left. She said it was too much stress. He was constantly giving them instructions, telling them what to do. He got aggravated and just went back to mama's. When he wanted to talk about things, he would turn on the TV or the clothes dryer or go outside. She said she followed those instructions as closely as possible. So one other thing, after the murders, the wrecking of the truck that was planned where Jake drove and also Chris Newcomb was in the car. She said there was something wrong with the truck, and she confirms that her half-brother Chris knew the plan, and they planned to split whatever insurance payout he got to pay off their bills. She said she knew from overhearing Billy, Jake, and George talking to each other about that plan. So that is kind of where we left off today. She's still on direct. I think she'll probably be maybe half the day on direct tomorrow, and then we got cross, and then we got redirect. So maybe at least through Thursday, I'm guessing. Chris Graves at Chris Graves on Twitter said that as Angela left, which was after jurors were escorted out, George looked to be the most emotional she's seen him. He kind of like wiped his face, like wiped a tear, I guess. I don't know if that's exactly. Let me pull up real quick what exactly she said, because I thought it was interesting that she noticed that for the first time, George looked emotional. Let's see here. It says, as his mother left and after jurors were escorted out, George Wagner IV appeared to bite his lower lip and wipe his face. It was the most emotion he has shown during the trial. So you can follow at Chris Graves as well. She's in the courtroom. And Jeanette Levy, all those guys, they do update. So, so that's kind of where we're at. And I'm interested to see what tomorrow brings. I am rooting for Parker and Nash to just go hog wild on her, y'all. I mean, let's rip it open. I've heard from somebody in the courtroom today that at times it seemed like maybe the prosecution was a little frustrated with how testimony was going. So again, we know a little more, I think, about Jake's proffer because she relied on that in openings. But overall, she's doing her thing. And look, has it been like the best executed prosecution case I've ever seen? No, but you know what? I think it's going to end in a conviction. I think that that's what Jake and Angela's testimony was really meant to do, is to put George there in the planning, during, and in the cover up. And then you get your conviction. I just think if Jake hadn't confessed and they kept this in Pike County, I'm curious, because I know until Jake confessed, there was a lot of people who still thought it wasn't the Wagner. So they didn't move this trial. How would that have gone? I don't know, y'all. But jurors are smart. They're not dumb. Common sense comes in, and I have no doubt this jury will do the right thing, y'all. It doesn't take a rocket scientist. All right, that's it for tonight. I appreciate you guys being patient while I get this out. I had pages and pages, about 15 pages of notes from 2 different people, so it just took a while to get it together. Again, big thank you to Big E and Jamie both. We'll see you tomorrow. We'll do it again. Tell you everything that was said in that courtroom. Until then, y'all be good.